It's time to listen to BHR with your hosts, Patrick and Paul.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Black Hole Rhetoric. This is Paul.
This is Patrick.
And I hope everyone is doing very awesome this week. This week, we're going to do something a little bit different. I want to cover a little bit of our local news. And one really big thing in our local news is coming up at the end of the month here in Williston, North Dakota. Our main street is going to be destroyed yet again with more construction. We have plenty of construction around the town, with one of our entrances to the city completely blocked off with construction, and now our main street is going to get hit as well. What we had go on last year with that Main Street initiative, where they were redoing it and beautifying the city, all of that basically needs to be redone.
I think that went on for, was that 2 summers?
It made it through the winter. Yeah, it went on for 2 summers.
Yeah, they started it one summer and then they did the other half the next summer.
Yep. And now we're going to be looking at that yet again. The plan is for it to kick off at the end of May and be completed by the end of June. But I highly doubt that that's going to happen because it's construction. They never seem to fit their time frame properly. So,
well, and that worries me because the reason they're redoing it is there's a lot of work that was not done to best quality.
Yeah.
And now you're cramming all of this reconstruction into such a short period.
Right. And it's kind of interesting, like the quality of it. Well, aside from the design of it, but the quality of the work was questionable. And now these companies are going back in and they're doing it for free. But yet, our city commissioners don't really want to answer any of the questions that are being asked about that, because it does seem a little bit odd that they decide, oh, hey, we're going to do it for free. So something was wrong. Someone was definitely to blame.
See, and that's because I've been down there. I haven't noticed anything that was, strikingly bad.
Right.
Some of the street corners, but that could have easily been blamed on traffic, people hitting them, because the way they're shaped for the parking and stuff is kind of weird.
Yeah, it's an absolute terrible idea to have the flower beds on the corners like that.
But for them to be doing it for free, obviously there's something in the contract where it says, if you don't meet these standards.
Right.
But you'd think that would have to be something extremely large.
Well, so this
not
is
just little details here and there. There has to be something major that's wrong that they're not putting out to the public.
Right. Well, but not only that, though, but consider the fact that we spent millions of dollars of taxpayers' dollars on this project, and it didn't get done right the first time. I mean, you know what? I'm going to set aside the fact that they're going back and doing it for free. To me, that's just an admission of guilt. But when you take into consideration that our city spent millions of dollars of our of the taxpayers' money, and someone messed up. Someone definitely messed up. And why wasn't this massive project under strict observation from the city council and from the actual city officials, our city engineer, for one example? You would think that they would want to actually sit and have someone supervising this to make sure that it's done properly the first time.
Well, and if I remember correctly, I feel like they either were running out of time or they ran out of time when they did it the first time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I can't remember if it was that they were just cutting it close or if they actually did go over the time that it was supposed to be done.
Yeah.
And I know at that point, you have your contract in place, you pay so much. After that, you're already working for free as well.
Right. To me, it's just extremely frustrating, though, because Williston has one of the highest sales taxes inside of the entire state of North Dakota, and yet our money goes to these projects that apparently are not being properly supervised. I mean, when you take into consideration the millions of dollars that these companies made and they didn't do it right the first time, are they still going to cut corners this time? And is our city going to actually properly supervise this construction that's supposed to be done in a 4-week period? I mean, or are we going to get stuck with this to happen year after year after year, and maybe the future ones are actually going to be coming out of the taxpayers' dollars? I mean, I'm very displeased at the fact that we're going to be with more construction getting hit on our main street. I mean, I'm tired of construction already, and we're just getting into the season. I don't know. What have you experienced with it? Because you have to go out to work.
So yeah, my route to work goes through the main construction, the one you were talking about. Basically cuts off one of our entrances into town. I have to take a back road, which I was already taking. Because the traffic going that way was so bad, and they've been adding stoplights after year, trying to make it safer.
Right.
now you're seeing such an abundance of traffic going this side route, and it's not set up for it.
Right.
That I've seen a lot of issues where there's an intersection right before a stoplight, and cars don't really know what to do.
Right.
Because that stoplight affects the traffic coming through, so it really bottlenecks a lot of traffic, and I'm pretty sure I've already seen at least one accident over there.
Yeah.
I was coming up over a hill, and I saw lights, police lights and everything, so I took a different route, so I didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
But I would not be surprised if that was an accident, because people are crossing, and because of the traffic backed up from the stoplight, they can't see who's coming.
Right. Yep. Well, and like that's actually another like the construction that's blocking off one of our entire entrances to the city. I believe that was another project that was just recently done within the last few years as well.
That one is different than what I thought it was. I know they're adding in a stoplight, and I think they're redoing that whole area, which I completely agree with because it was a very dangerous zone. I actually witnessed a very horrific accident in that area.
Yeah, but I mean. It still kind of goes back to that idea of getting it done right the first time. I mean, we're having I know they went and hit that area with construction back a few years ago, and I still think that a lot of this stuff should have been done the first time. It's not efficient. It's not efficient with our money. You know what? I'm okay with paying over a 9% sales tax, but it has to be done right the first time.
Absolutely.
Or a 9%. 9%. Yeah, 9% sales tax.
Okay, so the last time I paid attention, it was 7% still.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we added one for our EMT and firehouses and all of that as well.
Wasn't there one for the ARC?
Yep. They added one for the ARC, and sales taxes, they say that they go away, but they never really do. Same with years ago when they increased our sales taxes to build the new junior high, which has already been paid for. That never went away.
Well, that's another example of construction not being done right the first time too.
Right.
I was one of the first classes that actually got to go into that new junior high, and it started falling apart while we were still there.
Exactly. Not done right the first time. And that's our money. We need to actually treat it as such too. And it's okay to vocalize your opinions on these things. I mean, yeah, it's local, and that's definitely the time that we need to put our voices out there and let them be heard, that we're not happy with exactly what's with what's being done with our taxpayer dollars.
I think there's just a lot of people in this town that don't pay attention to it.
True. Very true. Well,
until you brought it up to me, I mean, I didn't even know that Main Street was going to be reworked again.
Yep. Yeah. And to kind of keep it on the theme of local news, our state, the state of North Dakota, recently dropped the charges from felony charges for the possession of methamphetamine and heroin down to misdemeanors. So now, if you are caught in possession of methamphetamine or heroin, it is dropped down to a misdemeanor. If you are caught with possession inside of a school district with those drugs, that charge is also dropped. It's not as severe of a felony. Which that really kind of upsets me, because those are the two most dangerous drugs that are pretty much known to mankind right now. I mean, there's some designer drugs out there that are more dangerous, but
way more awful drugs out there.
Yeah.
I'm torn on that. Half of that. The school thing makes me angry.
Right.
I think if you have any drugs in your school, well, not any drugs, but hardcore drugs like that, if you have those in a school,
in or near a school, I mean,
that should be a felony, hands down.
Yeah, a hardcore felony, I think. Yeah.
Possession in general, I mean, if you don't have enough to be charged with intent to sell, I think that's okay.
I think they do make a distinction between that, where if you don't have enough to sell, then it is more of a misdemeanor. But when you really think about that, it's a misdemeanor. It's a slap on the wrist, really, and you're talking about being in possession of heroin. Think about the quality of those people that are in possession of heroin or in the possession of methamphetamine, and should they go to prison? No, not necessarily, but those are very dangerous drugs to be out on the streets.
But if you're doing it yourself, who are we to say, and what you can and can't do?
Right. Well,
that's why I'm torn on it. Because obviously they're breaking the law.
Right.
But when it comes to drugs, I think they should all be legal. No matter how bad they are, they're just legal. You do what you want to do to yourself.
Right. Well, I've heard an argument where when it starts to affect society, that's when it becomes an issue. But when you think about if you're walking around or if you're driving around and you have heroin or meth on you, I mean,
never happen.
like that. That's where it's like, well, you could easily become an issue to society at that point, because if you have primarily, like, I mean, yeah, we had our issues.
If you're high, but I mean, if you just have them on you, you're not affecting society.
Well, hang on. I'll kind of propose a theoretical scenario, but. And primarily, like Williston we had our issues with meth in the past, and they were kind of stomped out before our oil boom hit. And then our oil boom hit, and meth and heroin came back at full force. And so it's like, it's the heroin epidemic that's really starting to scare me. I don't want to see that become a normal thing in Williston. That's the one where it's like, you know what? That's where it's extremely dangerous. That's where it completely ruins lives. But so does methamphetamine. But heroin, to me, is
meth hasn't been
way
laced
worse.
with all these drugs that are going to kill you, like heroin has been.
Yeah, in heroin, it's laced with what's called fentanyl, which is a synthetic form of heroin. It's the medical issued one, where it's extremely dangerous because of how potent it is. I mean, a tiny little milligram,
the smallest dose is too much
of fentanyl would kill us. I mean,
yeah, I was actually watching like a top 10 list about top 10 drugs that can kill you, and that was one of the things, was the fentanyl being laced with heroin.
Right. Yep. Well, and or you mean the other way around? Heroin being laced with fentanyl.
Sorry. Yeah.
But that's one thing I just find really weird for our state to do, though. I mean, we're an extremely conservative state, very, very red, very against narcotics, and yet we push this, right? Like, we drop the charges.
I think the big problem is our corrections facilities, things like that, being overloaded. It's a way to cut down on that.
Well, and it's kind of interesting that you brought that up. Like
prisons.
Yeah,
jails,
our prison. Yeah, and that's actually a really big part of it,
especially in the heart of the oil boom here. I mean, people that were supposed to have minimal amounts of jail time were just getting sent home because they had no room for them.
Yeah, exactly, and that was a really big issue. Well, and like one thing that I still kind of am a little bit upset about is that Williston they stopped funding, or the hospital got rid of the rehab center, the rehabilitation center here in Williston, which didn't make any sense to me.
Is it because of help? Because obviously that's another issue that we were seeing, is the hospital couldn't find help. I could understand it being for that reason. I just don't believe that is a valid reason for a hospital, because they are such money-making machines with insurance and everything like that. I mean, it's not like they're skating by. But here's the thing, is they may be money-making machines, but if they're not giving that money back to their employees, people aren't going to want to work there. Right. Especially when you're in a heart of oil country.
Exactly.
Even if somebody spent, the majority of their life going to school to become a doctor, or even the ladies that went to school to be nurses, if they can go work in an oil company and make more money, they're going to do that.
And I think that actually is a very major issue with our hospital here, is exactly what you just said. I mean, there's a lot of money being generated because people always get hurt. People always, end up dying, and their stop usually before dying is the hospital. And that place generates a ton of money, and I don't think enough of it is actually being returned to those employees.
No, our hospital makes me very nervous.
Right.
I don't want to get too much more into that, but
right, yeah. But I mean, it's just like for our state to drop drug charges, I find that just it's insane to me. I don't. You brought up a very valid point with an overflow of people going to our prisons, but should that justify keeping those people out on the streets that should potentially be in prison?
I mean, because obviously, if you look at people as individuals, there's the drug addicts that are not a harm to society; they're just a harm to themselves. Those are the people I keep thinking of.
Right. Okay.
There's no reason that they need to be in jail. They're harming themselves. They're not harming anybody else.
Right.
But then there's also the people that start committing crimes and violence to sustain their habit.
Right.
So when you look at it that way, maybe not.
Right. Well,
but I don't know, because if they haven't committed those crimes yet, then they shouldn't be punished, obviously.
Yeah.
But at the same time, do you really want to wait for them to go out and be violent or rob somebody's house first?
So here's another little scenario. No, I definitely feel where you're coming from, where there are those drug addicts that are a problem to society, and then there are those the drug users that are just a problem to themselves and to their families. But let's take an example. Like, you got to remember, these people will be caught in possession, so they will be out in the open for the most part, like the majority of them, or they'll be out driving around. So you personally, how many times have you lost your ATM, lost your keys, dropped them somewhere, any type of item in your pocket that you've lost, right? So if these people are walking around with drugs in their pockets, in their purse, wherever, they have a certain potential to lose this drug, this very dangerous drug, on the streets. And it's like, that becomes a massive issue to society then.
I remember when I was like 10 or 11, one of my friends and I were hanging out in Williston still doesn't really have any super sketchy areas, but I mean, not one of the nicest parts of town. I remember we did find like a bag of hash.
Right.
We didn't know what it was. We brought it to his parents, and they're like, "Oh, that's hash. Where did you get that?" Like, they started accusing us. We're like, "We just found it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what hash is."
Right.
So, I mean, if kids don't know what it is, they're more than likely not going to do anything with it.
I would hope not. But
I wasn't the brightest child. I would have left it there.
Right. Well, and I know there's an increase in problems in that juvenile age range in Williston, where crimes are actually really starting to increase in severity. Just the other week, I was over at my niece's house, and a police officer ended up pulling up in front of the house, and we ended up having a conversation about some things, and these two little kids walked up, and they kind of started to whisper to themselves that we really need to talk to the police officer and everything, and it was just kind of weird, and I thought it was going to be them kind of bugging the police officer, asking them questions, but what they ended up saying was that another kid at a park pulled a knife on them, and it's just like, that blew my mind. Like, these kids are 9, 10, 11 years old, and they're getting a knife pulled on them at a park. You really got to kind of wonder about the juveniles in the Williston area.
Yeah. Well, that scenario kind of intrigues me a little bit, because I mean, this is like a hunting-ish community, you know, like people hunt, things like that. So I couldn't even tell you how young I was the first time, but like, I knew friends that like walked around with knives, like they just had them, you know, like Swiss Army knives, shit like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if like the kid was just being a dick, or if there was actually any intent behind it.
Well, there's gang issues going on in that age range, in that like under 18 age range, and not like joking gangs either. They are.
So we had a lot of that.
Yeah, nothing like what they have now. Like, we're talking like kids that are slinging drugs. They are stealing vehicles at the age of 13, 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
Which actually, you know, sorry to kind of keep this on the local news type of subject, but that brings up another type of issue that I've kind of been thinking about, is the 5th and 6th grade middle school. The Bakken Middle School is right next door to the junior high. And so you have 7th and 8th graders right there, right alongside 5th and 6th graders. What is your take? Do you have any opinion on that? Do you think that's like okay, or do you think it's...
It doesn't bother me, because when you were in school, before they combined the 5th and 6th grade for all the elementary schools here.
Yeah.
You went to school with a previous class before you. So your first year in junior high, the 6th graders at one of the other schools, like, you were friends with them. So for them being right next to each other, they all already know each other. And even if you look at it from an 8th grade standpoint, they went to school with all the previous people there before.
Yeah.
Or, you know, not everybody, but some of that class. So, I mean, those age groups were mingling before that.
I agree, but I feel like when
it's a different time in their development.
Yeah. When we moved to the junior high, I felt like a lot of the associations that we had with the younger people were disconnected because of that separation. And now that's not the case. Like, they don't have that separation. They are right next door to each other. Like, they're not allowed to go between the two schools, but they're very
connected.
Close.
You could, if you wanted to.
Exactly.
Just like when it was the high school. You know, we were told never to go over to high school when we were in the junior high. We were told the other way around. Most people didn't, but you could.
Yeah. Well, and so, like, this is my question, is that if we plotted it out on, like, a timeline with this rise in issues with the juveniles, right? If we plotted that on the timeline with the moving or the creation of Bakken Middle School, if there would be a correlation, if the two things would be related, if we would see a spike in juvenile delinquency with the moving of this middle school right next door to the junior high.
What sucks about that is it has to happen before you could really know.
Right, exactly. So like now in hindsight being 2020, we could track this and see if there actually is a relationship. It would suck.
But if there is, what do you do?
Exactly. All you can do is...
it's useful information, but at the same time, it's useless information. Because the school system's too overcrowded here, and if we have another oil boom,
right,
they are going to have Bakken Elementary.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. They'll have to have some form of school for the... Well, and they created that because of the age range, which I kind of thought was weird because I thought like the big spike in age range of children coming in were underneath that middle school. So I think they were preparing for that oil boom that we had to last a lot longer.
And it was supposed to.
That's what everybody said.
It still could. The oil's there. It's
right.
It's not a lack of oil.
Right. It just needs, that price needs to go up for things to spark off here again.
But all it takes is that price to go up, and then overnight everything changes again.
Right. Yep. Well, and I think that's a good place to end our local news section. So let's move on over to the national news. Big thing this week, or actually just this Sunday, President Trump went over to Saudi Arabia and was speaking out against radical Islamic terrorism and asking them for help. We prior to this podcast, we watched or listened to his speech, and it sounded pretty interesting. It sounds so weird to hear him talk at these events because there is the way that he speaks to us, or how he spoke to us while he was campaigning, versus his speeches, which kind of seem to go a very different direction.
You can tell when he stays on script.
Yeah.
When he goes and off and rambles on his own, it's not very intelligent, I guess I would say.
Right.
You know, he tends to stick on a topic and be very vague about what he's talking about. When he sticks to the script, it's right to the point. It's very professional.
But like I notice there is a difference though in what is said between the scripted President Trump and the unscripted, and I don't know. It's very interesting to see that polarization, and I think there's enough to say that there is a polarization because what he said to the leaders in the Middle East sounded very tame and very timid in comparison to what he's been saying to us, the American people. I mean, he, by the way it sounded with his campaign and even after the campaign, like he wanted a full-on, we absolutely need to get rid of radical Islamic terrorism, whichever one you would prefer. And when he talks to them, it's like, hey guys, give me a little bit of help. Like, we need a little bit of help. And he's talking to the leaders of some of these countries. And you have to also kind of, keep in mind that these leaders are not exactly the most moderate of Islamic leaders. I mean, like the president or the rulers of Saudi Arabia. I mean, take those people in that country for an example. Like that is, by its definition, like almost a very fundamentalist country when it comes to Islam.
I wonder, and maybe it's just because I have oil on the brain because what we were just talking about is if he's trying to create better relations with Saudi Arabia and in that area to try and maybe bring back oil.
Well, and see, like, that was a really big issue because the thing that killed oil for the world was OPEC really keeping their production at a high level.
Yeah, and Saudi Arabia is part of OPEC, right?
Yep, and it drove the price of oil down. And I think that there's a little bit of a Russia narrative to this whole thing as well, actually. So when, like, do we need to befriend the Middle East because of oil? No, I don't believe we do.
No, but I mean, I'm talking for an economic standpoint,
right.
Getting them to bring that price.
So, see, this is a big issue. Basically, like, what we've noticed is that this price of oil, it dropped severely. But Williston and our oil boom up here, like, it disappeared, but it didn't die. We didn't stop drilling. We kept going. Pretty much, for the most part, we have effectively destroyed the power of OPEC. They no longer really have that same control as what they used to. And what it is that Saudi Arabia is now, they're no longer in a position of power. OPEC is no longer in a position of power. And one very massive part when it comes to this is our relationships with Russia. If the relationship with Russia actually improves, right, then we actually have a potential of kind of creating our own OPEC, because between us and Russia, we would have the majority of the oil on the planet by far. And so if that happens, then we set the price for the most part. We control the price. We know exactly how much to produce to keep it extremely profitable or to keep things in our best interests. And so it is kind of weird for President Trump to go over there and sound somewhat apologetic in his speech, when the truth, or what I believe, is that the Middle East is no longer in a position of power when it comes to any resource. And I think we need to treat it as such. Like, we don't need to bow before the rulers of the Middle East. And I don't know.
It's weird to do it now.
Right.
I could understand when they still had power.
Yeah.
And I guess I didn't realize that they didn't have power anymore.
Yeah.
I was under the impression that everything's just kind of been the way it's been, and that's what it is.
They shot themselves in the foot by driving the price of oil down, really. They caused such a loss, and they caused complete chaos inside of their own countries, taking the loss on the oil. Well,
the reason I stopped following it is because a lot of what I saw was just, Facebook posts. And one day you would see, oh, it's the end of OPEC. Oh, no, never mind. Oil's not coming back. And it was just back and forth all the time. And you never knew what really was going on.
Right. Exactly.
And even what they were going off of was just speculation.
Yeah. There was a lot of speculation, specifically about oil. I think what it was is like they were trying to stimulate something back in our Williston play, where they wanted, it was almost like a last-ditch effort to keep morale high, because there was a lot of layoffs going on around the area. And so people, and honestly, like a lot of people in Williston, they wanted it to remain relevant. I mean, Williston became the epicenter of probably one of the greatest migrations so far. Well, I mean, in recent history. I mean, we had tens of thousands of people come up here, float up here. I mean, we could even, I feel like it's safe to ballpark that hundreds of thousands of people have been in and out of Williston over the last, 8 years because of the oil play.
One thing that's weird to me is, I wasn't here for any of the previous oil booms, but how many people stayed this time around?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think there was a considerable amount of people that stayed in the prior, like when you think about it, like proportionate, like in proportions, right? Because before this last oil boom kicked off, the population of Williston was like, I think in the ballpark of anywhere from like 12 to 14,000. Yeah. And now we're
just above 30.
Yeah. We're pretty close to that 30 range. And so, like, if you rewind it, right, so the population of Williston prior to the last oil boom was, like, probably, like, the one before, the one that ended in the 80s.
80s. Wasn't there a small one in the 90s?
No, it ended in 88, the year I was born. So, I think that the population of Williston was considerably smaller prior to that oil boom, and it really went crazy. But I still think that it probably went from maybe ballpark of 8,000 people up to that 12,000 mark. So it almost doubled, and that almost happened again. I mean,
sorry to our listeners that are not from here. I didn't mean to start another local tangent.
Right. But I mean, well, in a sense, like, yeah, it's still definitely local, but Williston played a very massive role in a national subject. When it comes to oil, you still have to keep your fingers on the pulse of Williston a little bit.
Or just the Bakken area.
Right, yeah. The other one, what's the formation down in Texas?
Is that Three Forks? No, that's Bakken.
Here. Eagle, or...
I'm not sure.
But yeah, no, it's I think it's actually Eagle Ford. But with all of these oil formations in the United States, and with Russia and their oil up in Siberia, also some of the oil that they've recently found right up near the Arctic Circle, kind of up near more closer to the North Pole. I mean, the power that our two countries have when it comes to oil production is insane. And so if we actually do become friends, which the media I don't think will ever allow it, but if we ever did, we would become the world's powerhouse when it comes to oil.
Well, and there's no saying that other smaller countries wouldn't join in with us either. It wouldn't. I mean,
Exactly.
Obviously, we are the two deciding factors, but you could also get other countries.
No,
involved.
yeah, exactly. That's a very valid point. I mean, you might even see some people or some countries try to break off from OPEC because they want to have more favor to the new powerhouse on the world when it comes to oil production. But like, speaking of Middle East and oil, another really big thing that happened this last week was Erdogan, President Erdogan of Turkey. Yeah. His bodyguards, we could call them henchmen, they were, and himself, they were in the United States to talk to President Trump. And a really big thing that took place was like the protesters were violently beaten on our own land by these bodyguards, the henchmen. And it's kind of weird because our media never brought it up. But I mean, like,
there are articles, but you have to search for them.
Right. And I think the really big issue there is that these people have diplomatic immunity. I mean, like, they cannot be touched. Even if, like, it was a definitive, like, yes, they started the fight. They went over and they started to beat up the protesters without a doubt. If you could even say that for a fact, you still couldn't do anything against them.
So what really drives me the most insane about this, I understand that it is a tricky scenario because of diplomatic immunity, but the fact that the president never acknowledged it, never, said, no, this is not okay, never did anything about it is what's making me so angry about this situation.
Right. And I mean, it's like, some of the people, actually a pretty good percentage of the protesters, they were citizens of the United States, and they were beaten by people from a foreign country, and nothing was said. And nothing was said by the president or his administration, to the best of my knowledge, and nothing was done. We'll just ignore that. But and nothing was done about this afterwards. I mean, I feel like diplomatic immunity should be taken away. I think that should be taken off the table.
If we went to Turkey, and our president's, if the Secret Service started beating the shit out of Turkish protesters, not that Turkey would ever allow it anyway,
right?
There would be consequences.
I absolutely think that there would be. I just don't even understand the whole premise of diplomatic immunity. I think that's a massive issue. People should, like, no matter what, if you come over here from a foreign country, if you are protected by our Constitution, which it seems like they tend to be, like they are given more rights being over here, they should also fall under our law. And if you are doing a criminal activity, it should be absolutely irrelevant if you're from a foreign country, part of a group of people coming with a leader from a foreign country.
Well, if you can't do whatever you please in your own country, what makes you think that just because you go to another country, it's a tricky situation, so I'm just going to do what I want because they're not going to handle it?
Right. I mean, like, these people, like, they could speed down our streets. They could do pretty much whatever they want. They have complete diplomatic immunity. And, like, I feel like there's something very, very off about that. That does not make sense to me, that they have this free pass to get away with almost anything in our country. Well,
and I'm not 100% sure why the protesters were there, but I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that this man is a borderline dictator.
Right. Oh, yeah. With some of the actions that he's recently taken, and I know that he's trying to change their constitution to extend his power, to extend his presidency. I mean, it's a very dangerous game to go down.
He recently blocked Wikipedia from the Turkish internet because somewhere in that article, I don't remember if it was something referring to him as a dictator or something he didn't like. There was just one sentence out of the whole Wikipedia article, and he banned the entire website from appearing on their internet.
Right, that's crazy. Well, and so, like, one thing that I kind of find interesting about, like, the fact that we find that mind-blowing, right? Like,
well, that's almost an equivalent to burning books. Wikipedia is a lot more trustworthy than it used to be. Obviously, it's still anybody can change whatever they want, but for the most part, people don't really troll it.
Right.
Small dumb things like celebrity profiles and things like that, they'll mess with it.
Or the Big Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is almost an equivalent to burning books. Mm-hmm. It is a main source for information on the internet. Fucking Christ.
Hey, it's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll keep the sirens in this time. Sorry about the sirens in the background, but that's part of recording.
We're recording fairly close to a fire station. So.
Right. But the dangers that come with giving any person, any entity that much power. I mean, how they can just take away the internet or certain aspects of the internet. And are we going to see this come about in our country or in more of the European countries? I mean, like, Erdogan is starting something, I think, very terrible in that area. Who really knows where this might lead if he is not checked, if the UN doesn't put a number of sanctions on that state. But,
well, is Turkey part of the UN?
Yes, yeah. Actually, not only is Turkey a part of the UN, but they recently joined NATO as well. So if somebody goes to war with Turkey, it's going to be a very tricky scenario. Or I'm relatively sure that they are part of NATO. I think that occurred. Never. No, I'm not sure at all anymore. I might have to say I totally second guess myself.
I'll Google it. Go off on.
But one thing that I kind of find interesting is like how. And I'm guilty of this as well, is being very critical of the countries over kind of near the Middle East, right, and their structures of government, but to actually find out that, like, the government of France, right? So I think I even probably went off on a tangent about this in the last podcast, was the amount of power that France has, or the president of France has, and that he can dissolve the parliament, and it's like. That amount of power is found in westernized countries, and it's starting to develop even more so in the United States, and probably, I mean, in a sense, it already is here too. But
Turkey is a part of NATO.
Yeah, so Turkey is a part of NATO. So if stuff really goes wrong with Turkey, that's going to be a massive issue.
Well, do you think it's going to kind of be like how parts of World War II were, where everybody kind of just ignored Hitler until he started, like, really going off the walls?
Right, yeah. I mean,
like, I think I don't think anybody's going to mess with Turkey until they do something to another country. Any
of the smaller countries around there really won't be able to do anything to Turkey because if somebody tries to stop them, they're a part of NATO. If an aggressive attack on Turkey is considered an aggressive attack on everybody a part of NATO, which that includes us. So that'll be just a total ball of mess when it comes to diplomatic agreements, foreign agreements. If
anything happens, I mean, recently we've talked about a lot of things that could spark, any wars, but so far everything seemed to have either died down or the media just stops reporting on it.
Right. Well, and that's one thing that I kind of find interesting is that the media and their clickbaity titles, they're kind of it's weird. Like, I feel like the media has a combination of uncensored Tourette's and just wanting attention. I mean, you just see it, like, just in the last week there was 2 reports with President Trump. One was the Comey memo, which was leaked to the New York Times, and the New York Times also reported on the Russian debacle that President Trump gave them declassified information, or he gave them classified information.
But he also has the power to declassify information.
But both of these reports were given to the New York Times by an unnamed source without actual proof, without actual documentation. And I mean, is that appropriate? Think about back when you were in school, right? Would you have been able to submit a paper without citing your sources? No. Like, you
would have got an F on that paper.
Yeah, you have to cite your sources. And in a sense, the New York Times, they're not citing their sources. They're not providing the documentation that says, without a doubt, this is true. And I have a massive issue with that. I have a massive...
be burning to the ground right now.
Right. Hopefully not. But I have a massive issue with the media kind of getting away with this, that they can report on these things without having absolute proof that this is going on. I mean, like, yeah, an unnamed... I mean, even that, like, I don't even know if I can actually say that that's okay, that they have an unnamed source that is giving them information.
Well, this is why it's such a big problem. the media, this entity, the media,
Yeah.
has such a control and so much power over how, even other businesses, the government, everything. It influences how they act and how they say things. Mm-hmm. When you have something with that much power,
Yeah.
and it starts, just throwing out misinformation or unverified information,
Right.
people are going to react to it. And sometimes, if it's a big enough story, it could cause a lot of chaos.
Right. Yep. And honestly, like, I could care, like, I do care about the actions of our president. I just want these things to be absolutely verified. And if they are verified, then I will be with the crowd that stands against the president, like on certain aspects. Like, if there are these absolute terrible ties with the Russian government, right? Then yeah, like, of course I'll be like, no, that's messed up. I don't think that Trump should be our president, because if there is an absolute proof that he was participated in, whatever, rigging an election, that's bad, of course. But there needs to be proof. There needs to be facts. And you cannot react emotionally off of things that do not actually offer that proof. And I find that I tend to see it quite often with my friends that lean a little bit more liberal. They immediately jump on these things and they say, like, yes, you know what? Trump is this, Trump is that, Trump is this. And it's like, be a little bit slower to react on those things, because we need proof. You need to verify where these things are coming from. That falls into what I
was just saying. Is people are going to react. They don't care. They see the title. Some people just read the title. They don't actually read the information in the article.
Yeah, no, that happens, I think, more often than what we would hope.
And I am not super pro-Trump, but he is our president. I will back him until he does something that I feel is out of line.
Right.
But there is, at least on the liberal side, there is a media witch hunt for him and all conservatives.
Right. Yep.
And people hate him so much that, these clickbaity articles, everything, it gets put out there like fact.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and that's a very, very dangerous game to play. And the part that I'm starting to become a little bit fearful of is, like, we've talked about it in the past with sharks looking for blood, right? Well, what if there is no blood? What if there is no more blood to be had from this? Like,
well, that's when you get the 2 Scoops article.
But no. I think there's something much more dangerous that could happen, right? Like, if you've been having a witch hunt, right? Like, let's say somebody's having a witch hunt for you, and all of a sudden, like, there's no more, like, they can't offer proof. People start to call them out on it, and they can no longer offer proof. Will society turn on the witch hunters? Will the witch hunters be witch hunted?
Well, here's the issue. With them throwing out unverified information, there'll always be blood in the water.
Until
they create their own water.
Until people start to call them out on that. There's no way that the Russia narrative, if there is no proof, there's no way that can carry out for 4 years.
Well, here's the thing. It's already died out. The media has not reported on Russia, I don't think, at all this month.
There was the Russia classified information. But
I mean, I guess in the respects of what they were reporting.
Well, and there's still definitely that narrative, because the Comey incident plays a role in that. Comey being fired plays a role in the Russian narrative. I did overlook that. Right? So it's like, if the media and the liberals continue to push really hard on this witch hunt, and like the possibility, if there is nothing to be had, if it actually comes out completely clean, will there end up being a witch hunt for those that that were doing it in the first place? What types of things will occur to the media? Because we can already kind of see that coming, right? Like, we can kind of see that coming where the media is throwing things out there, right?
Well, and I think there's 2 big reasons you see that. One is obviously all of the media companies, their businesses, they need to make money.
Right.
How do you make money? Obviously you get people to look at your ads, or look at your articles, they see ads, whatever.
Yep.
But then you also have, and maybe this is just personally for me, I feel like the media is trying to maintain a stranglehold on the main source.
Right.
So when I say media, obviously like newspaper, the old school media.
Yep.
When you have this rise of, YouTube people creating their own news and doing it better and more informatively.
Right. Yeah, it's cutting into their profits.
It's cutting into their profits, because you see, like, they've already tried to attack a few YouTubers, misrepresenting everything, that's going on in their articles. I think we've talked about PewDiePie before.
Right.
Things like that, and it's almost like a desperate grab to try and
hang on to the old times. Yeah, they want to maintain any type of power, dignity, and money that they already have, or they're trying to hold on to it. It's their death grip, and I think that's absolutely true. I think we'll see more and more power being stripped away, and when that occurs, they're going to have to get more and more extreme in their titles and become more clickbaity and really no longer verify their sources, which in turn creates this vicious cycle where more and more people will no longer trust the media and they'll go towards the YouTube people.
And that's how I felt about this. I was very hopeful that, YouTube was kind of going to kill the original media.
Yeah.
It'll still be there, but it won't have the power it did.
Right.
And as, the newer generations roll in, it'll kind of phase out.
Right.
But now with what is happening, I kind of think that, they're winning in a sense.
Yeah, because they're doing more extreme things. But there is consequences to your actions when you put out information that is not verified. If they put this information out, let's just say a year from now, they any type of investigation into Trump, it comes back and it's 100% clean. There might be heads rolling because of all of this stuff, right? Like the people at New York Times might be held liable for certain things that they've said. And we could see the reverse happen where there is a witch hunt for those people that spread this misinformation, or if it is a misinformation about the president, about his campaign, about his associates, right? I mean, I'm not saying that this is 100% true or that this will 100% happen, but it is a definite possibility that I think people are overlooking when they are spreading this information, especially when the New York Times has released two things without documented proof. They have an unmanned source or unnamed source that is not actually furnishing the documents of what is being done, and that's a super dangerous thing to have happen. And I don't know. It should be interesting to see what plays out, because we're 100 plus or minus 10 days, but we're 130 days into Trump's presidency. We still have over 3 years with him as president.
Potentially,
and potentially more, and or potentially less if the Russia investigation ends up being true, the Russian narrative ends up being true. Then there's definitely a chance of less time. But I just want to give that warning that if the Russia narrative is not true, there might be blood in the reverse direction, and I personally don't want to see that.
I think the only thing you're really going to see is just one side of the media attacking the other. I don't think you'll see the public completely turn on the media.
Oh, I think no, it won't. It's not the public. It's not necessarily the public that I'm worried about turning on the media. What I'm worried about is a lot of strict legislation being passed. If let's just say that the Russian narrative completely is a wash, that there is no Russia ties.
That's dangerous.
Exactly, right? That's why I'm like, that is a very potentially dangerous road that people are overlooking, right? That there could be solid, and there would be grounds for it, though. That's the part that's so bad about it. If the Russian narrative comes back and there's no truth behind it, they could use that as grounds to pass legislation to really put a stranglehold on the fourth estate, the media. And I don't think people should be overlooking that. But, I think that is a pretty good place to end our rant for this week.
Yeah, I'm definitely... we're going to try and cover more and more topics as we go on. Try and, do 3 or 4 topics per episode. Mm-hmm. If there's anything you guys would like to hear our opinions on or like to hear us talk about, make sure you leave comments in our video descriptions.
And make sure... one of our best forms right now for communication, and one thing that we really do want to push, is more of our Facebook. So make sure you go check out that page, like it, share whatever we have, and we really appreciate you guys listening to us.
Yes, thank you.